Halloween Kills in the box office this weekend with a very good Thursday night preview. We're going to talk about that right here and some of the news on James Bond, Venom 2, and another movie coming out this weekend that a lot of people are overlooking called The Last Duel. Stay tuned, we're about to get into it. Online. Well, how do, folks? It's good to see everybody again. Please, of course, as always, hit that like button, that subscribe button if you haven't already, and you are enjoying the content we're putting out on this channel. We much appreciate it. Please, most importantly, do share out the video. The shares on Twitter and Facebook and other such social media platforms, really a big help for those YouTube algorithms. And, of course, drop a comment below before you head out today. Let me know what you think. Love to hear your thoughts. Have you seen any of these movies we're going to talk about? Do you want to see them? What are your thoughts on some of these things? So let's get right into it. So can Halloween Kills and The Last Duel scare up a Bond-busting box office numbers? Well, that remains to be seen. However, so far, we can tell you that Halloween Kills is having a pretty good start. But I want to go into this. This is from IMDb Pro, Box Office Mojo, and then we'll have another one coming up in just a bit. I'm going to pull up the Deadline article here just as a precursor. Halloween Kills grabs $4.9 million in Thursday night previews last night. Pretty good showing. Not as good as Halloween 2018. Might not have as big a weekend, but that's okay. This is a movie with a relatively small budget. We'll talk about that in just a minute. But first off, let's get to the movies that are entering their sophomore and junior weekends, their second and third weekends here in the domestic market. First of all, we have Venom, Let There Be Carnage. We talked about this last week and the week before. One important thing you'll see up here on the screen right now, this is a big weekend for Venom. Not here in the U.S., but this is a big weekend for Venom in the international markets. As you can see here, until now, really we've only had Russia, we've had some opening in Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, relatively small markets, those last two. But as you can see down here, really nothing out there as of yet. Release dates this weekend coming in big places like the UK, broad release, France and Germany over the course of the next several days. So this next week, this next 10 days, let's call it, for Venom, between today, Friday, and Sunday next week, this is going to be a big telltale sign about where Venom is going. I think at this point, it's relatively safe to assume that after this weekend and after the following weekend, Venom should have an easy course at this point to get to and cross that very important $200 million domestic box office number. What will make a big difference, though, is how it performs in the international markets. And again, at this point, I do not believe we have a release date yet for China, although it is supposed to be available there at some point. We just don't know what that would be. But again, as we mentioned in the last video, with Venom's relatively low superhero budget box office, we're talking about a movie that cost around $110 million to make, according to Forbes magazine. Probably another $80 to $100 million or so in global marketing, P&A, that's print and advertising, which, again, for a movie like this, is pretty much stock standard. So if we split the difference and say $90 million, Venom's all-in costs of somewhere around $200 million means that it needs to probably reach between $375 and $400 million to reach that break-even point. Again, I can see that on the lower end on the 375, and mainly because, again, this is a Sony picture, and Sony has been putting movies in theatrical releases as traditionally has been the case, meaning there's no strings attached, there's no subsequent release on a streaming platform, nothing like that. It's, here's the movie, it's going into the theaters, and we're going to run it until the grosses die off enough. No 45-day limited window like Disney. No concurrent releases on a streaming service, again, like Warner Brothers and HBO Max. So they're probably getting the best deals with AMC, Regal, Cinemark, so on and so forth. So I think Venom, at this point, should be able to coast relatively well, again, provided that the international box office is what we have come to expect with its predecessor from 2018. So let's go over to James Bond. No Time to Die. Now, this one has me a little bit more concerned. And normally you'd look at a movie like this and say, well, it's been out in the States for a week. It's been out in the international markets for about 2 weeks. It's made $330 million to date. Why should we be worried? Well, again, if you've kind of followed what has been going on with this Bond movie for the last couple of years, it's been since it was actually shot and put in the can. The holding cost on this movie, first of all, the production budget was initially placed at about $250 million. But of course, production budgets are just that. They're simply budgets. It doesn't mean that's what they necessarily spent. And usually while budgets are adhered to or met, oftentimes when it comes to things like Bond, where you have to do a lot of reshoots, which they did, those budgets get blown to smithereens. The final numbers on what they think they might have spent on the Bond movie was probably somewhere in the order of $325 million plus on production, which included some of the reshoots they had to do. This movie was also marketed globally 2 or 3 times because of the repeated delays, putting the marketing costs somewhere north of $150 million, according to various Hollywood and business reporting magazines, and we've covered some of that here before on previous videos. So Bond has to reach somewhere on the order of around $950 million before it sees a profit. That's a big problem for a movie that has now been out for several weeks and is just at the $328 million mark. I wouldn't be surprised between international markets and domestic markets we see this number get closer to $400 million, but that means it's got to make another $450 million after this weekend, if it reaches that mark by Sunday, to get to that point. It's becoming increasingly more likely, I think we can say at this point, that Bond, for a movie that could still turn in around $800 million internationally, or globally rather, that it's going to lose money. And remember, when that China box office opens on the 29th, I believe it is, for James Bond, when it opens in China on that date, remember, the studio is only going to receive about half of what they get from most other countries. About 25% of the box office that is realized in China actually makes it back to somebody like Sony Studios. So it would have to do a tremendous amount of business in China for it to really put a serious dent in that budget that it needs to overcome. So this weekend we have The Last Duel. And let me get back to what we're talking about here with IMDb Pro. The Last Duel could be kind of a sneak-in picture. This is a movie that was inherited by the Walt Disney Company when it purchased Fox. So this was a Fox movie that Disney has just kind of been sitting on, waiting for the right time to go. This was part of the multi-billion-dollar deal. And Disney, of course, like the rest of their movies they are doing between now and the end of the year, okay, they're getting a 45-day theatrical exclusive window, and which means this movie would be eligible to go on to Disney Plus on or about December 1st, okay? Now, we have seen with Shang-Chi, and some others like this with a 45-day exclusive window, Disney is waiting 15 days after the 45 days is up, just to give it a little bit of extra breathing room, although they're not obligated to do that. So it could be December 15th. Maybe they hold it a little bit longer. Just depends, I think, on how well it does in the theaters. I think if the movie performs very poorly, they'll probably go ahead and just, slap it onto Disney Plus right after the 45 days is up. But we'll have to wait and see. It's a Matt Damon, Ben Affleck movie. Looks like it could be pretty interesting. I'm actually a little bit, little anxious to see this just to see how it turned out. But Halloween Kills. Now, this is the one. This is the movie this weekend that everybody's talking about. If you have Peacock, you can watch it on the NBC Universal Comcast streaming service. Now, if you have a Peacock subscription and you have the free subscription, you can't watch Halloween Kills. If you want to see Halloween Kills on Peacock TV at home, you have to step up to at least the $5 per month subscription. And if you want to see everything that they have on Peacock without commercials, then you have to go to the $10 a month subscription. But here we go. Halloween Kills. Let's take a look at this article. Opening around 3,600 screens. And that is noteworthy because, of course, Bond and Venom this weekend are still capitalizing some of the biggest screens and certainly the most screens, both still clocking in over 4,000. Now, horror movies are always kind of a boon for most studios. They have relatively low production budgets. In the case of Halloween 2018, that this is a direct successor to, That movie was shot for around $10 to $15 million. Very, very low budget, but of course, the marketing side of things really doesn't change much when you're talking about a global release. It doesn't matter if you're releasing a big blockbuster like a Marvel movie or versus something like Halloween. You still have to pay for the advertising, you still have to pay for TV spots, you still have to pay for web ads, and they don't really care what you spend on the movie. That commercial space is the same price no matter what, generally speaking. So one of my previous videos, I talked about The Nun, one of the James Wan films of the Conjuring franchise that had a relatively similar budget. I think it was around $20 million for The Nun. They spent another $80 million on global P&A, print and advertising on that movie for an all-in cost of around $100 million. So yes, based strictly on the production budget, those movies can turn an extremely high return on the investment of production. But when you factor in marketing costs, they still make money, but it brings some of that back to earth. Halloween Kills, I don't know if they quite spent that much. I have not found a figure on marketing budget yet. But honestly, I'd be surprised if the marketing budget for this kind of movie would be substantially less than what we saw for the Conjuring movies or for The Nun or any of these other things out there. In fact, Quiet Place Part 2 earlier this year with a $40 million or $60 million production budget, I think they spent another $60 to $80 million on global marketing for that film as well. So I would expect the all-in costs for Halloween Kills to be a lot closer to $100 million than to 10 or 20 once you factor in the P&A. So that does have to be taken into account. That being said, NBC obviously was, they wanted to put this out day and date on Peacock. It's there. Certainly, I think this is going to have an impact on the box office. Peacock has 50 some odd to 60 some odd million subscribers. The problem is a lot of those subscribers, or the vast majority of them, I believe, are free. They're on the free side. So they're not getting Halloween Kills unless they did like what I did today. And I said, all right, let me throw them the $4.99 so I can watch Halloween Kills at home because I still don't have any theaters here. It's driving me nuts. So are you going to watch Halloween Kills in a theater? Are you going to go get Peacock if you don't have it already? Are you going to watch it there? Let me know. Give me a comment on that one. But I think that this movie should still do fairly well. And I think, like I said, if it gets to around $200 million in global box office, I'd say it's a relatively safe bet at that point that the movie has broken even and they may have made a little bit of money on that. Again, if the calculation is for them to drive new subscribers into Peacock and they can attribute, hey, in the month of October, we picked up 2 million new paying subs, or let's just say they took 2 million subs they already have and converted them from free subscribers to $5 a month paying subscribers, that's a win for them too with this movie. And again, this is the kind of thing that Warner Media with HBO Max has been doing all year long with their films, basically kind of sacrificing their performance at the box office, going in knowing, having made a conscious business decision to say, look, we're going to take lower revenues at the box office this year, but we're going to enjoy hopefully 5+ years more of constant revenues coming in from subscription services that will, over the long run, make them a lot more money than had they put those movies exclusively in theaters this year. Again, that was their thinking. I'm not saying whether I agree with it or not. I think some movies it was a good move, but I think there's a number of movies that it was a bad move. Godzilla vs. Kong was definitely one of them. Mortal Kombat was another. And certainly Dune, I think, is a huge mistake to release that day and date on HBO Max, which will be next weekend, and I cannot wait to talk about that. So let me know what your thoughts are on this movie, Halloween Kills. Have you seen it? Did you like it? Are you going to see The Last Duel this weekend? Have you seen Bond yet? How about Venom 2? Who's going to be the king of the box this weekend? I think Halloween Kills should probably take the grand prize, especially with James Bond's very first weekend in the U.S., which was not great. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great. $56 million. So we can expect this weekend probably Bond to clock in around 20 to 25 million, I think would be a reasonable assumption. I think Venom will probably see around the $15 to $20 million mark this weekend domestically. It depends on how much competition these movies are going to give. If everybody stays home and watches Halloween Kills on Peacock instead of going to the theater, then potentially Venom and Bond might do a little bit better. We'll see. But I'm curious to see what The Last Duel does because there really isn't a lot of numbers out there yet. It has not gotten a lot of attention. Disney has really not given it a lot of push. So this will be interesting, and we'll follow up Sunday, maybe Monday morning, and just see how all this turned out. And until then, have a great weekend and take care.